This week with me, a writer to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the Fulton News, Mitchell Northam. I say a man of many talents who does a lot of writing and does a lot of things. If you guys remember the show Martin, he's the equivalent of Hustle Man. Mitch, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Always good talking to somebody else from back home.
So, Mitch, just tell me how you got into your passion of journalism. I know you've done an assortment of things, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but what led you to writing?
I would start as a junior at high school. I took a new class. We had never had the class before. I needed an elective to fill, so guidance counselor just threw me in this class with a teacher that I really liked, who I'm still friends with today. Her name is North. So I took a creative writing class and liked it a lot, and she gave me a ton of encouragement and stuff. So I sort of just hung on to that and kind of stuck with it, and still really, by the time I graduated, wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do with my life. I thought that I wanted to be a teacher and coach high school football. So I decided to study how to be a teacher. First semester there at Warwick, I took a teaching class and I hated it. And so I kind of talked with a few people. My English teacher at Warwick, she gave me a ton of encouragement and, told me I was a good writer and stuff. And I just sort of started down that path. And my dad was the one who encouraged me to kind of start a blog. So, yeah, I started like a little sports blog and kind of just plugged away at that for a year. And then I started putting myself out there and getting some freelance gigs. I did some stuff for the Star-Democrat there in Easton. There used to be a weekly paper there in Salisbury. I think that maybe only lasted about 4 months. It was called Delmarva Crossroads. I did some stuff for them. And then I was doing stuff for the Star-Dem. I started just writing about high school hoops, probably at this point, maybe like the winter, like December 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. And I was writing about basketball team and other, high school teams around the Eastern Shore on my blog and for the Star-Democrat. And a guy by the name of Edgar Walker, who works for Bleacher Report now, but he used to have a website called mdhoops.net. He asked if I would write for him, so I did. And then that turned into basically he merged with DMV Elite. They're an organization that helps run the Big Governor Challenge now. They're in Salisbury. So I just did a lot of writing for free, a lot of writing for a little bit of pay, but not a ton. I started doing some stuff for SBNation for their blog that covered DC United, just writing little blog posts here and there. I ended up going to Salisbury University. I wrote for their student newspaper. It was one of those things where, like, once I just caught the bug of writing sports, I haven't lost it. Just stuff for different SBNation blogs. Covered DC United one summer for, I think it was summer 2014, for a website called soccervibes.net. So that was pretty cool. It was kind of my first experience as like a credentialed reporter going into a pro locker room. So that was really cool. Interning, you were still at the Daily Times then when I was an intern, and was the sports editor at the Salisbury University paper. Just did a lot of different hustling things. And then by the time I graduated, there was a position open there at the Daily Times when Ted Shockley was the editor. And I started out as a general assignment breaking news reporter. So I did that for a while, full time. And then, you and Sean ended up leaving to go on to different jobs. So Ted put me into the sports reporter job, and I did that for about 2 years here at the AJC, not covering sports right now, which, is something I realized I miss a lot. But, hoping to get back into it soon. I'm still doing a little freelance stuff on the side covering sports. So that was sort of my path. That's a long story, the step-by-step.
So you write about a lot of basketball, and I'm assuming that basketball has to be your number one sport. What is it that drew you to basketball?
I don't know, because in high school, I never played basketball. In the backyard or pick up with my friends or whatever, but I never played on a team. But in high school, I always loved going to the basketball games. In high school, I played football and I threw shot and disc for the track team in the spring. So in the winter, I really didn't have a lot to do. I would lift weights for football. And I think I was kind of first drawn to it because my mom was the cheerleading coach when I was in middle school. So I would go along to games with her. And the games were always packed. They were always tons of fun. And when I was kind of, like I said, doing kind of that hustling, just right between 2013, one of my friends, Josh Weber, who runs the clock at Y High, he was like, hey, come out to a Y High game. I had never been to a game at Y High before. I went to Colonel So, most of the basketball games I've been to have been kind of in that North Bayside area. And I was like, yeah, got a chance to meet Coach Waller, and, we still have a pretty friendly relationship today. He taught me a ton about the game. And once I started writing about basketball, I realized that I liked it a lot. Right now I'm doing some stuff for SBNation covering mid-major college ranks. Grambling State came into Georgia Tech. It was a bye game situation. Grambling State hadn't beaten a Power 5 team in years, and they upset Georgia Tech, and it was a really cool moment. So yeah, like I said, really wasn't that into it when I was younger, but it's definitely something that I really enjoy writing about now, and I can get back into full time, but we'll see.
What do you feel people think it's the greatest misconception about basketball, especially the way it's played?
Greatest misconception. I think a lot of people, as it relates to the pro game, you hear a lot of people say that they don't play any defense. And I think that's just because a lot of times what they see, the people who don't really watch it, they go to ESPN or they see the highlights on their phone. I mean, you don't see defensive highlights ever. I mean, you see dunks and you see three-pointers and high scores and stuff. So I think that's the biggest, there's a lot of great teams out there. The Warriors are a defensive team. I mean, they have all these guys who are outside of Steph Curry, who's a little guy, but all these guys who are at least 6'7" and can switch on different defenders. I mean, Draymond and KD and Iguodala and Klay Thompson. I mean, all those guys can guard every position. The Spurs are one of the great defensive teams. I mean, those Memphis Grizzly teams with Zach Randolph and Tony Allen and those guys, I mean, that was grit and grind. Those were defensive teams. So I think that's definitely about the pro game, one of the misconceptions. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one for me. Every time, I talk to somebody who doesn't really watch basketball, they're just like, I don't play any defense. I mean, well, they do. You just have to pay attention.
We talk about watching on TV, and they look like average-sized guys, but then when you stand next to them in real life, you're still looking up at them regardless.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a shocker. I think the biggest kind of wow moment I had for me for that was it was actually at a soccer game. My first time going into the locker room, I went to go interview Bill Hamid, who was DC United's goalkeeper for a long time, one of the best goalkeepers in MLS. He's playing overseas now. But I went up to go interview him, and I didn't realize how big this dude. He's got this big chest, and he had to be 6'5", and I just looked straight up at him. So yeah, that was definitely one that kind of shocked me. And there's been a couple college guys who have kind of just been amazed by how big these dudes are in person. And pro too, I went and covered a Wizards game once, and went to interview John Wall after the game. We're all kind of huddled around, and I kind of was able to kind of get my mic to him. And I still had to look up at John Wall, and you look at you're watching on TV, and you think John Wall's not that big guy. I think there's a misconception with point guards is when we're watching on TV, we just all think that they're all 5'7", which actually John Wall's 6'4" or something. So I'm about 5'11", 6 flat. I'm not. Maybe that's being generous. But, yeah, all these athletes are really big dudes. I mean, I've interviewed a guy who is, shorter than me or about the same height. I've interviewed a couple college guards who have actually been shorter than me. But when it comes to pro basketball and, like I said, even soccer, these are big dudes who spend a lot of time working on their bodies. And seeing them in person is a shock sometimes.
Covering DC United, you had to trek to RFK a lot. What is it like going up in that old building? I've been there a couple of times to attend the sporting events, and the walk up there is maddening. Just going up to different levels, and I say FedEx is worse, but just right. RFK just being so old and antique and archaic.
Yeah, RFK, it was cool because I grew up as a Steelers fan, but my stepdad was a Redskins fan. So, I'd watch NFL film stuff or hear him tell stories about the old RFK and stuff like that. I never got a chance to go there until I went to see a DC United game in person. But it was funny, the first game I went to there just as a fan, I think this was 2011, went with my brother and a few of his friends. And my brother, who's half the size that I am, went to go sit down in his chair and it just broke. The stadium, I think everybody says this about RFK, but it was a dump, but it was our dump, meaning the DC fans. It was a one-of-a-kind stadium. It's crazy that, in 2017, a team played in, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, what we have down here in Atlanta, in RFK, because they're just totally opposite and totally different. But yeah, RFK was, like I said, it was a dump, but it was still pretty cool. Yeah, it was still pretty cool. They still had the dugouts there and stuff from when the Nationals played there. Yeah, I'm going to miss it. I don't know when exactly I'm going to tear it down at some point. I don't know when that's going to happen. I think it'd be cool if I don't even know if this will happen. Maybe if DC United could play like a friendly there one more time. It'd be really cool if the Redskins could play there one more time before they tear it down. Maybe a preseason game. But yeah, that stadium is definitely one of a kind and seen a lot of great moments. It's rare that you get a soccer team, a baseball team, and a football team to all play in one stadium at a different time. It's definitely seen a lot of great moments, the return of baseball to Washington and all those John Riggins runs. And DC United won, I think, 4 championships playing in that stadium. So it was cool.
When it comes to watching an event as a spectator as opposed to being a journalist, what are some of the things you try to separate from the journalistic side of you as a fan?
It's been weird kind of working in sports journalism and then still going to some games as a fan. A lot of times I'll be sitting there, and I'll go to games with my girlfriend or my buddies or whoever. And a lot of times I'll be sitting there and basically start thinking about like how I would write the story of the game, how I would rate my gamer, what moments or whatever. But I try to it's funny, like, when I was a kid, I didn't have to try to be a fan. Like, I always loved the Steelers and I always loved the Orioles. I really don't have to try with those. But sometimes going to games, it's like I've lost like some investment as a fan in some teams just from being a sports reporter. But I can still go to Orioles games and scream "oh" as loud as, as any of them. Go to Steelers games and throw my terrible towel around. I threw a temper tantrum here in my living room 2 weeks ago when they lost that game to New England. I still can't believe that. But yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah, going back to games as a fan now when you've been kind of going as a reporter or a photographer for a long time. And I really haven't even been doing this that long. I guess about 5 years or so. But I can still be a fan, I figured out. I kind of thought for a while I might lose that. But no, I still have it.
And one thing you probably notice, especially as being a fan, if a game looks like it's pretty much locked up and then everything changes, you're thinking, man, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to blow up my whole gamer because of that.
I'm glad I'm not on deadline for this, yeah.
Everybody's had that one time where they felt like everything's good. Now you got to blow up the gamer. How do you try to minimize the damage of how much you have to change in the story when it changes on a dime?
Yeah, I haven't had to do that lately because I haven't, been covering sports full time for the past year, just kind of on a freelance basis. I'm trying to figure out how. Probably the last time I had to do it was in 2016 when Salisbury's lacrosse team went to the national title game there in Philly. And it was just back and forth the whole time. And Salisbury ended up winning by 1 goal at the last couple of moments there. And I just try to, when I'm writing a gamer, like I can kind of write as the game is going along, I try to just write down a Word document on the side where I'll try to just write down kind of moments, or maybe I just have a little notepad and I'm jotting down stuff, just moments or facts of the game that I know are going to be important. And then later I can go in and read and stuff like that and figure out what was the most important and all that. But it is tough sometimes, but I kind of like it. Get that just kind of adrenaline rush, trying to pound out stuff on deadline, but not easy. I think there's a lot of people out there that think that we have easy jobs, but it can be difficult sometimes. But, when it all comes out at the end and you get to kind of see what you did when it's in paper or online, it's pretty cool.
And it's funny, when I was writing for Deadline or as opposed to something live, I would work my way up. I'd go with, okay, here's the killer quote I want at the end. And then I worked my way up to the beginning because I always thought that opening lead would take forever to try to figure out. And it's one of those things I would just let come naturally and I'd come back to it later. And I always felt that was some of the most difficult writing. Writing the beginning is tougher than writing your end.
Yeah, a lot of times I still do this sometimes today, no matter what the story is, if it's a story that's going to have a bunch of interviews, a lot of times I'll just transcribe all the quotes first and just kind of have them on the side. I figured out that kind of helps me get kind of the juices flowing on how I want to kind of start the story, because maybe there's a quote or something, or maybe I just talk to that person about something that I can kind of paraphrase into a lead and not necessarily something I want to quote. But yeah, it can be difficult sometimes to kind of, start on a story, try from the bottom up. But I don't know what you mean. Sometimes you're looking at the quotes and you're like, all right, that's the money that's going to go here. And yeah, for sure. I definitely get that feeling.
And what I did in the case of a situation where I had to blow the gamer up, I'd go with the guts of it first, especially if I'm knowing I'm just going to put one quoteless online. I'd go with the guts first and maybe change some tenses here and there if I need to. So that way I'll wait till that final out or wait till that final play and then just go from there. I've tried not to have to blow it up as much as I needed to. I just put the key points there and just go straight from it.
Yeah, blowing up the gamer is not fun when you have it all pretty much written. But like I said, sometimes it can be fun, when you kind of that rush and, sometimes good stuff comes out in those pressure situations. So take the good with the bad.
Now, you also mentioned you are a Steelers fan, but an Orioles fan as well. That has to be interesting, especially going to the Baltimore games. I'm a Redskins fan in addition to being an Orioles fan. So it is a unique dynamic sometimes.
Yeah, yours is a little bit more easy to explain. But yeah, people ask me about it all the time. They'll see me wearing, Orioles hat one day, and I think I got a Steelers hat on now. Yeah. I always just explain to people that, the Ravens didn't exist when I was a kid. Baltimore didn't have a football team until I was 6 or 7. And my dad, growing up, he basically became a Steelers fan because his dad was a Cowboys fan. And, they watched the Super Bowl together, and he wanted to root against his dad. And growing up in the 70s, the Steelers were really, really good, won 4 Super Bowls. So that's how my dad, because he grew up on the Eastern Shore too, and the Baltimore Colts existed then. So I just kind of followed him. And, growing up in Maryland, he was an Orioles fan. He didn't sway away from that. And they've stuck with me.
What's the transition like first from the move from Maryland to Georgia?
It was tough. I lived in Maryland for most of my life, went to school and got my first job in Maryland. And, it might have been a little different if I was still in the state, but maybe I got my first job across the bridge, or I would probably leave because I thought I just kind of maybe owed it to myself to just kind of see what else was out there. Yeah, like I said, about 2 years into my job at the Daily Times, I kind of just started looking around online and seeing what was open, and AGC for a news reporter. And I applied for it, and to my surprise, got an interview, and thought it would be something that I could do and something that I would like. And maybe it would be not so bad to get away from sports for a little bit and just kind of write some news and stuff and get into some city council meetings and all that for a little bit. And so, yeah, I interviewed for it and all that, and I got the job and kind of talked it over from my parents and some people and kind of figured I had to just go for it. So, yeah, moving away was definitely hard because I had lived one place for close to 20 years. So it definitely wasn't easy. The thing that made it a little bit easier is, when I was a kid, my mom actually grew up down here just south of Atlanta. So my grandparents lived here. So summers when I was a kid, we would come down here and hang out with my grandparents. They lived just south of Atlanta in a little city called Riverdale. So, I knew the city a little bit, kind of knew the dynamics of it. I did not know how bad traffic was down here. It's the worst. If you take DC traffic and multiply that by like 10, then you get Atlanta traffic. I don't really know why it's that bad. I think the city became populated faster than they could build roads. But it's been good just to kind of see a city and get out and explore it and stuff. But I really miss the Eastern Shore. That's always going to be home for me. It's been good to kind of work in a different kind of journalism and writing muscle for me. But it's been good to kind of just get that experience. I think someday down the road, I'll probably, look to get back into sports. But right now, it's all good.
It's interesting. We were going to schedule this to record it on a Friday, and you had a trial. And I was going to ask you about the trial. It's funny doing crimes and cops and courts. I did that as well. I always saw it similar to sports trials, at least, where it's like a press conference or a sporting event. Whatever you see out there is the truth. Nothing filtered, nothing being omitted. What you see is what you get.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between covering a trial or an election. Definitely elections. There's always a winner and a loser. There's always something newsy. You go to a city council meeting, you don't just recap, well, Councilman so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. No, you got to find, did they pass some ordinance that's going to piss a bunch of town people, or did they change some, or did they sign off on, some budget thing? When you go and cover a football game, you're not going to give the whole play-by-play, but you're going to identify when so-and-so scored that 66-yard touchdown run that kind of flipped the game on its head. Definitely a lot of similarities because, I hear people a lot of time, people who have either covered news for a long time or covered sports for a long time, they feel like they can't do the other thing. But it's really, I haven't found it to be that hard. There are a lot of differences, a lot of similarities too, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a far less amount of FOIAs that you have to apply for sports as opposed to
right, yeah. Yeah, not a ton of FOIA stuff in sports, but a little bit. I think I filed maybe 2 or 3 FOIAs when I was doing sports at the Daily Times. But one of them was for, my Comico County signed that contract with Under Armour, and I just wanted to see what the contract looked like. So, but there are opportunities for that in sports, but definitely more when you're covering a hard news beat.
Especially for the people who may not know what FOIA means. It's Freedom of Information Act. There's a lot of stuff that you got to apply for. What is that process like, filling out a FOIA form?
It's not fun. Basically, you kind of have to make sure you kind of have all your ducks in a row and have all the information that you want. You basically just have to outline everything you want in that FOIA request. And, we kind of had a template that we followed there at the Daily Times, and the AJC has one too. And, you send it off and they have, a certain amount of time they have to respond to you by. So, once you send it, it's really just a waiting game, and it can take, 30 days. It can take a month or two. It can take, it's not fun, but it's necessary, sometimes to get that information that isn't readily available to you, but it's information that is public and that you should have.
And I know sometimes the waiting effect can be a pain, and I've done that before, and I always thought, wow, is it really this pressing? Do they really have to take that long? Some places are maybe quicker than normal, and other people will just drag it out. And I always feel like that can be one of the most frustrating things, that if you were trying to plan on writing something now, you may have to wait a month to start doing that. And I feel like that can, not be detrimental to a story, but it can be frustrating in writing something.
It can just, a lot of time can pass between, you filling it out and getting from the story sometimes, but somebody's got to do it.
What do you think is maybe the biggest misconception people have about journalists and reporters in general? I know people used to ask me, hey, do you get paid by the story? And I always tell them, if I did, I'd actually worked harder.
Well, there's actually some websites out there that kind of have that model. Not that I agree with it. I think, now in the current political climate we have, I think a lot of people out there that don't really understand what we do. I think out there that just write whatever we want and just make stuff up, and that's not how it works. You get fired that way. But I think that's the biggest thing. I just think people just don't understand what it's like. There's a lot of people out there that just don't really understand, what a journalist's main function is. Our job is to support it, not to make stuff up. But there's a lot of people out there that just think we're out to get people. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to present information and let them make their own decisions. That's the biggest thing. I think there's some people out there that just think we're just trying to, for a better term, just get people. But that's not really what we do.
What do you feel is the biggest sin for a reporter or journalist to do?
I would definitely say just making anything up, whether it's a quote or part of a story or lying or any sort of that is basically the worst. It's the opposite of, like I said, what a journalist is supposed to do is to seek truth, find the truth, and then report it and present it to the public. So I think if you're making any part of what you're reporting up, if you're just pulling it from thin air, then that's not a good thing. And I think that's probably the worst thing a journalist can do. Also, would just be to ignore stuff. I think there's a lot of people, you see something going on and you're just kind of like, oh, well, whatever. It's just kind of one of those things. And don't ignore stuff and don't make stuff up.
It's funny, jump in transitions here. It's funny, you see a lot of movies that maybe are set in newspapers, and those tend to get a lot of the Oscar buzz and things like that. But you ever notice there really aren't that many TV shows that really are centered around the newspaper? Maybe they have a newspaper as a setting, but it isn't really centered around the paper itself.
Yeah, I've seen there's not a whole lot of journalism TV shows out there. Maybe it's just not a good function for a TV show. I'm not sure. Definitely saw Spotlight. I love that. I think one of the issues that a lot of people have with kind of journalism movies or TV shows is sometimes they make the reporters out to be like heroes. And that's not, I think a lot of times what the reporter's intention is. Like I said, we're not trying to be heroes. We're not trying to seek the spotlight a lot of times. We're just trying to, like I said, seek truth. Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of TV shows about newspapers out there. Maybe that'll be the next idea for a Netflix series.
When I think of shows that sort of were set in newsrooms, first thing that comes to mind is Lois and Clark. And even then, I think they over-exaggerate what a newspaper reporter does. And the other one's Perfect Strangers, but even then, they didn't really talk about the paper itself. It just was used as a setting.
one of the best of season 5 of The Wire. Really kind of takes you inside the Baltimore Sun newsroom there and kind of uses that as a mechanism to, further tell the story of that show and kind of tell it from the newsroom's kind of point of view. That's probably one I would point to, if you wanted to watch if anybody out there wants to watch a TV show, watch The Wire in whole if you haven't seen it, but definitely go to season 5. I think that's the shortest season. I think it's maybe 8 episodes or so, but definitely check that one out.
We had always said that, especially as a newspaper reporter, the day is mostly spent, depending on what you're covering, is making calls, waiting for people to call you back, and then writing and filing before deadline.
Yeah, I've had a lot of days like that.
And maybe that's another thing. It just doesn't seem like it's the glamorous life, and we don't all eat Chinese food all the time or Thai food as stereotyped in most of those shows.
Yeah, a lot of those TV shows, you just kind of see the reporters at their desk, and, we're not always just sitting at our desk. We're out and talking to people, and if you're a sports reporter, you're at a basketball game or in a coach's office or whatever, or you're at a city council or talking to a source or wherever you are. Yeah, a lot of those, TV shows and movies, they got the reporter, with the tie all drung out and feet kicked up on the desk and eating a box of Chinese food and, just kind of then pounding on the keyboard and stuff. And it's not exactly like that, but people can have imaginations.
Yeah, I don't even know how many people even wear a tie in the newsroom anymore.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever worn a tie in the newsroom.
Yeah, my cousin, actually, when he worked down at the paper at Harrisonburg, and I think you know him, Thran Dennis, he actually said that the males had to wear a shirt and tie. Everybody, sports, news, everything.
Man, yeah, no, I think the only time I wore a tie in the Daily Times newsroom was when later in the day I was leaving to go to a funeral. Yeah, and not a whole lot of ties in the business of sports reporting. And I don't think I've wore a tie in the AJC newsroom either. It's usually a pair of slacks and a polo.
Yeah, I can't think of the last time I wore a tie. Yeah, maybe going to and from MDDC Awards and coming back to work and actually working. But other than that, no, I can't say I have. It's even weird when you see people not even wearing a polo shirt, when you just wear not even a shirt with a collar. That's reserved for weekends.
Yeah.
I know it was always, Cardinal said, no shorts in the newsroom.
Oh, no shorts? Yeah. Times, a lot of times. But I don't know. I just, bosses there were cool with it. I guess as a sports reporter, I was just out at, especially in the summertime, you're out at those fields and stuff so much. I mean, for the most part, my outfit when I was working at the Daily Times was a pair of cargo shorts and a polo. I remember, I think I wore shorts to work one day in like December, and I got so Camlish was outside and said something to me about I was crazy for wearing shorts. But yeah, that was sort of my thing. But yeah, I got down here at the AJC, and yeah, that's a strict no here. No shorts in the newsroom. So I could get away with it up in Salisbury, but not here.
And one thing I've noticed, especially seeing by your tweets, you're big into hip hop and rap. I'll admit I do not listen to it as much anymore. I feel like I've sort of maybe been in an arrested state since 2000. Everything I felt, a lot of stuff since 2000 really hasn't been good, in my opinion. I mean, there's a few things here and there, but I mean, sure. I know you're definitely more into rap than I am. How did you get drawn into that?
Oh, man. So that's another one. Actually, it's funny through my this is going to sound weird, but through my mom and cheerleading. So my mom was, my sister's cheerleading coach or whatever. So I was probably in 4th grade. Sister was in middle school, and, so my mom coached her in the Pop Warner cheerleading stuff. And, when I was a kid, I would listen to, I listened to Will Smith and stuff. Like, it's G-rated rap. So, I listened to, Will Smith, and I had the Space Jam album and, fun stuff like that. But when my mom was coaching, my sister in cheerleading, they were getting ready to do the competition thing. And they had to make like a mix tape thing to do like a routine to. And one of the main songs that they used was Bombs Over Baghdad by Outkast. So my mom bought the Stankonia CD and basically ripped from that to like this tape that they made their big mix to. And once she was done with the CD, I mean, my mom's not really going to listen to Outkast. So I just kind of swiped it and started listening to it and really liked it. And basically that's how I got into I was probably, like I said, in like the 5th grade or something like that. And I had some friends that pop, and it's just, something I've always listened to, since then, basically. I'm still a huge Outkast fan. There's some new stuff that comes out now that I really like. Like, there was 2 albums this year I liked. One was Forever is a Mighty Long Time by Big Crit. 2 Chainz' new album. I think it's called Pretty Girls Like Trap Music. Those are 2 that I liked this year. There's a lot of stuff out there though that I'm just not with, that kind of, I think they call it mumble rap. Basically, it's like Rich Homie Quan and Young Thug and a couple of those other guys and Migos, and it's not really for me, and that's fine. I think rap is sort of, rap and hip hop are sort of the voice of sort of young people, and if that's what the young people are into, then that's great. I kind of stopped listening to new stuff for the most part, basically probably like when I was like a sophomore in college. I kind of started listening to a lot of older stuff. Like, I love Notorious B.I.G., love Outkast, love Goody Mob. But yeah, as far as like kind of the new rappers go, I really like Big Crit. He just kind of has he kind of just has an old school feeling to him. It has kind of this country style to it, just kind of bebop stuff. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff out there I think that's still for me, but for the most part, it's not.
Yeah, on my iPod, I know I have maybe one. Funny thing is, I'm not really a Biggie fan. I prefer Tupac, and that feels like that'll go, that whole Biggie, Tupac, who's better type thing will go on till the end of time. But a lot of Tupac, Snoop, I don't think it's much Eminem. A lot of older stuff.
He just came out with a new album. I haven't heard it yet, though. Heard mixed reviews about it. But yeah, I definitely listened to a lot of Eminem growing up.
Yeah, I got LL Cool J. Aside from like the Sugar Hill Gang and things like that, Mystical is definitely one. Feels like you always have to split it up. Like Eminem, pre drugs, post drugs, Mystical, pre-jail Mystical, pretty much everything. Bouncing Back, Danger. Those are probably 2 of my favorite ones.
Yeah. There's a lot of rappers out there that have the pre and post drug era or the pre and post jail era. Those are always fun to compare. The post-drug Eminem is actually one album that came out when I was, I think, a freshman in college. It was really good, and I can't remember the name now. I can see the album cover. But there's some stuff that comes out now that, is still, I think, for me, and, I enjoy listening to, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm just like, all right, I just kind of accept it. I'm like, all right, this is for the kids. It's not for me, but that's okay.
You mentioned Space Jam, and I have to say that's probably one of the best sports soundtracks ever. So many songs that were on there, and I can't remember the whole soundtrack, but I can just think of those 5 or 6 songs on there that really stick out.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on there. I found it a few years ago. I had the CD, and there's a lot of stuff on there. Like, there's this one song, it's Method Man, Redman, LL Cool J, and somebody else.
Busta Rhymes, Hit 'em High.
Yeah, Hit 'em High. There's some stuff on there, R. Kelly, and I think Monica has a song on there. There's that Quad City DJ song. It's a good one. It's a good soundtrack.
Yeah, I really can't think of any other sports movie that had a soundtrack that good.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, I don't know, the movie soundtrack, I think, has kind of become something of a dinosaur. A good movie soundtrack. I don't think you see a lot of people out there buying the latest movie or whatever it is. And that's sort of something that was like an 80s and 90s thing, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like those movies, that's probably some of the better soundtracks. You can get anything by John Williams. John Williams is probably the preeminent film conductor. So many different songs, so many different themes, from Jaws to Star Wars to Superman, Jurassic Park, and Indiana Jones. It's just too many to name.
There's a lot of stuff. It's kind of cool. There's some new stuff that he does in the new Star Wars movie with that soundtrack, but there's also a couple moments where he kind of calls back and he'll pull like a little bit for like A New Hope or a song he did from Empire or one he did from Phantom Menace. It's cool.
And I think they use a little bit of the Superman theme in Justice League, where it's a little bit darker, but they use the original one and on a darker scale. But it is really interesting. You got to really listen to it real close, but apparently that's up on YouTube now, so those things are a little easier to pick up on. But it's just so crazy. And it's funny how music can always lead you back to a point of this thing happened in your life, and I remember this song is that soundtrack of it.
Oh, yeah. I totally, every time there's a song by Young Jeezy, Akon, and I think Lil Wayne. It's called I'm So Paid. And every time I hear that song, I think of wrecking my car in high school because that's the song I was listening to when it happened. But yeah, aside from that very specific moment, yeah, there's definitely a lot of songs out there that I'll hear and it just take me back to a moment. Yeah, music a lot of ways, a time machine, just kind of takes you back to certain things.
Yeah, I remember Get Rich or Die Trying. A lot of those songs on that album takes me back to, oh, wow, early 2000s, before I graduated college. It just makes you think, wow, it's been so long.
Yep, yeah, a lot of stuff I'll hear, and I was just like, oh, man, that song came out when I was like a freshman in high school, or that song came out when I was in the 7th grade, or, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny just living in those different times. It's like, wow, 1997. Whenever I hear Hit Me Baby One More Time, I'm either a sophomore or a freshman in high school. And it's like, yeah, I remember all the girls were going through that Britney Spears phase.
Yeah, whenever I hear 50 Cent Game, I always think about middle school. That was like a song that they would play at the middle school dances, and one that my friends and I really liked. That's a fun one.
And it's always funny when you listen, like, man, really? Should they be playing this song?
Right. It's like, man, they played this at my middle school dance. That's wild.
So jumping back into the sports thing, I know we diverge a little on music. Is there one sporting event you would love to attend either as a journalist or as a fan?
I have a couple things on my bucket list. I crossed one off in 2016 when I got to cover the Army-Navy game. That was an experience, and I'd love to go back as a fan. But covering it as a reporter was really cool, too. It was the first time Army had won in, I think 14 years, something like that. But it was a long time. But, yeah, now I would say on my bucket list, I would like to cover the NCAA tournament or just go to it as a fan even. I'd love to get to one of those. I think one of the cool things would be, not even necessarily the championship game, but the early round and maybe, get a chance to see one of these mid-major teams upset a power like Duke or something like that. I think that would be a cool experience. So those are definitely two things on my bucket list. I'd love to go to an Olympics, winter or summer. I think that would be really cool. And you get a chance to see some sports that you're not really exposed to on a regular basis. And if I got a chance to cover it as a reporter, kind of get the chance to tell the story of a shot putter or a archer or, somebody who is great at curling or something like that. I think that would be really cool. So those would probably be the two big things, the NCAA tournament and the Olympics.
Do you think we'll ever see a 16 upset and 1 in the NCAA men's tournament in our lifetimes?
I don't know. If I had to bet money on it, I would say yes, just because I think something could happen where somebody gets misseeded. Because I think it's come close to happening a few times. I'd have to go back and look. But I think it's possible. It's got to happen at least one time. I think it took forever to get to that up. But, yeah, I think it'll happen. I don't know who the team will be or, whatever. But I think that something will happen somewhere along the line where a team gets seeded too high and then a team gets seeded too low or, whatever the case is. But, yeah, I think it'll happen. If I was a betting man, I'd bet money on it happening before I died.
Yeah, because it's funny. I've said in my lifetime, I've seen popes. We're probably going to eventually see someone take over the crown in England, but we still hadn't seen a 16 knockoff of 1. And I feel like that will happen. Just don't know who.
Right. I just want to see an Orioles World Series sometime in my lifetime.
I would like to as well. The last time they won one was the year I was born. Last thing I want it to be is the year I die.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see an Orioles World Series sometime in my lifetime. One of my greatest memories, going to a sporting event as a fan was the 2012 Game 2 of the 2012 ALCS. It was the first time the Orioles had hosted a playoff game since, the 90s. And I think it was that year, 2012 ALCS against the Yankees with my dad and 2 of his buddies from work. And I still have the video on my phone. Jim Johnson struck out A-Rod for the last out. It was awesome.
And that's funny. I was going to go to that 2012 series, but at the point I ended up paying for a class at SU to learn how to shoot video. So I had no money to go to that one. And I ended up going to 2014. I went to game 1 of 2014 against Detroit where they pretty much they had a lead. Detroit started coming back. Andrew Miller came in and then they busted it open late in the game. And after that, it was pretty much academic. And who knew that it would set up the next day even better with that Dellen Young triple. I believe it was a triple, I know the bases loaded, bases clearing hit. I don't know if it was a triple or double, but that was the one that had to be most insane playoff game in Baltimore baseball history in a while.
I forgot about 2014 a little bit, but yeah, Dellen Young. Yeah, that was a fun year too. The Buck Showalter era, they've definitely had some fun years. I think it might come to an end soon, and I really don't want to see them trade Machado. But it's been some fun years. Definitely much better than the 2000s were.
And I remember I missed out on a playoff game going to one of my friends in 1996 or 97. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll get to go the next year. And then that 15 years of losing baseball, it almost didn't look like it was ever going to come back. A chance to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, those were some rough times.
Well, Mitch, I do appreciate I do appreciate you participating in this week's interview and this week's show. And how can people catch up with some of your work?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. You guys can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Primetime Mitch. I'm on Facebook. You can just search my name. I'm on Instagram at the same handle. You can go to theagc.com and see some of my stuff. Or you can go to one of the places I'm writing about basketball right now is midmajormadness.com. It's an SBNation blog. You can head over there and check some stuff out as well. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at Primetime Mitch. So I'll tweet out most of the things I write.
Actually, I had to ask, how did you come up with the Primetime Mitch handle?
So I didn't come up with it. It's funny. I had an English teacher at Warwick. It's kind of funny. Her name is Lauren Hill, not to be confused with the singer from the Fugees. But yeah, I had a teacher at Warwick, and one day I was late to class and I was wearing a Deion Sanders Braves jersey, and I walked in and I was probably like 15 minutes late or something, and she was like, "Welcome to class, Primetime Mitch." And it just kind of stuck. She called me that for basically the rest of the semester, and so did a couple other people. And that was around the time when I started on Twitter and was trying to think of a handle, and I just picked that, and it just kind of stuck.